Hello everybody, welcome back to the Confederate Independence Timeline, Episode 6. And before I get into this video, I do want to say that the Confederate Independence Timeline, Episode 7 will be the last video in the timeline for good. So, yeah, we're going from 1987 to 2020. So, yeah, there you go. And if you have an idea what you would like to see me cover on the next timeline, I'm thinking about doing the JFK survival timeline. If you guys would be interested in that, that is something I have been working on the side. Or the Supreme Court choice timeline, where the Supreme Court chooses the president, though I don't know how it would work that. But anyway, guys, let's get on to it. 1986, President Miller withdraws all troops from Vietnam, ending the Vietnam War, a campaign promise. The UCSA, they pass their own versions of the Uniform Time Act. They would also pass their own different versions of the Freedom of Information Act, so that happens. 1967, President Miller declares, "Our union needs a reboot." The USCSA would pass their amendments, which is presidential accession. The USA would have the 25th Amendment. The CSA would have the 19th Amendment. The U.S. withdraws from the Union states, or withdraw from any Cold War conflicts. They're done. We're dealing with our own stuff right now. And race riots break out across the Confederacy. 1968, Vice President Martin Luther King Jr. is assassinated. It's a day we all need to mourn. President Eisenhower sends the military to quell the KKK and anyone who was involved in any of this. So, yeah, it's done. Like, Eisenhower's fed up with it. President Eisenhower would pass the Civil Rights Voting Rights Act. Hallelujah. Unity Senator Birch Baugh would defeat Republican President William Miller 180-137 to become the 37th U.S. President, but loses the popular vote. Shortly after, former President Miller declares, "We should radicalize against the man." Sorry, I'm trying to do voices. I'm not good at it. In 1969, civil unrest breaks out across the Union. It's the poor man versus the rich man. Who's going to win? Also, the 1969 Confederate election, Whig Vice President Richard Nixon, the two-time Vice President, who was Eisenhower's first Vice President and then took Martin Luther King's place. Yeah. He defeats Governor George Wallace, who supports these, he supports the race riot. He's like, yeah, back to segregation. No, that's not how that works. The Confederacy's become progressive. Nixon beats him 177-62 to become the 16th President of the CSA. President Nixon would sign the Public Health Cigarette Smoking Act, and President Baugh, who is a populist and does support the poor man's revolution, meets up with William Miller in the presidential office in Philadelphia, which is the capital of the Union. And the CSA passes the 20th Amendment, which is the voting age to 18, and the USCSA passed their own version of the OSHA Act. 1971, President Baugh would sign the Union Reboot Law, which is a complete reboot of the entire Union, and I can make a video about that later, not anytime soon, but if you want to see it, comment down below. President Baugh signs the Special Ed Act, which gives us universal special education to people who need it, and the USCSA and the Bretton Woods systems, so golden cash, all that good stuff. In 1972, President Nixon orders the development of the Space Shuttle program. The USCSA increased Social Security spending. President Baugh signs the Paris Peace Accords with Vietnam. The USCSA founds their own version of the Drug Enforcement Agency, or Administration, and the USCSA passed the Endangered Species Act. And Republican President William Miller defeats Democrat President Birch Baugh, Independent Senator Edmund Muskie, Socialist Senator George McGovern, and People's Congressman John Ashbrook to become the first U.S. Prime Minister. Yep, this is involved in that reboot. It's a five-way race of the top 5 candidates. They debate, they go out in public, all that good stuff. A televised public debate. I'm serious. A televised public debate, which is all William Miller's idea. And they go out there, and these top 5 candidates go to debate. They're on all 50 state ballots, or they're on the ballot in every state. They go out there, do their thing. They all get equal time. And essentially, the Union has now become a unitarian government. So the central government has more power over the state governments, essentially. So there you go. Dictatorship. But William Miller wins to become the first Prime Minister of the Union. And there's nothing noteworthy in 1973, sadly. In 1974, President Nixon resigns due to the Watergate scandal, so his vice president, Pete McCloskey, becomes the 17th Confederate president. And he pardons President Nixon. Holy crap. The 1974 election, yes, there are another change. There are two two-year terms for the prime minister, and guess what? It's back, and guess what? It's infinite. They can serve as many years as they want. But Republican Prime Minister William Miller defeats Socialist Senator George McGovern, People's Senator Eugene McCarthy, Democrat Senator Eugene Muskie, and Independent Congresswoman, the first woman ever to run for president, Shirley Chisholm, or the first black person also as well, holy crap. And, you know, he wins re-election. And Prime Minister Miller declares, "Let's rewrite the mistakes of our ancestors." I wonder what that could mean. Rewrite the mistakes of our ancestors. 1975, Prime Minister Miller declares a war for democracy against the CSA, even though... Choo! 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 Oh, excuse me. Even though the Union is no longer a democracy, it's a dictatorship. A dictatorship with democratic proceedings, essentially. And therefore, Prime Minister Miller orders 3 planes that could crash into Confederate government buildings, which pisses off President McCloskey as he declares war against the Union. And the USSR becomes the first country to put a man on the moon because of this. I know, weird. Democrat Senator Fidel Castro, he ends up running, the senator from Cuba, not Cuba, Cuba. He ends up running, someone who's been very vocal, a war hawk. He's a war hawk. He says we need to get back the Union, we need to get the Union and the Confederacy back together, but our way, not their way. And I will fight for that. And Pete McCloskey's like, I'll fight for it too, but I don't want any of their land. And he's like, really now? And that kind of hurts him in the debate. And Fidel Castro, he beats Pete McCloskey, 158-86, to become the 18th Confederate president. The Confederacy bombs, like, it's not atomic or hydrogen bombs, they're just small makeshift bombs. And they bomb several places within the Union. They bomb California. They bomb Jefferson. Excuse me, not California, Jefferson. They bomb Nevada, Nebraska, Iowa, Indiana, Ohio, several places. They're polling places, essentially. Republican Prime Minister William Miller defeats Libertarian Governor Ronald Reagan. He runs. He's Confederate. He's pro-Confederate. He's like, yeah, I like Fidel Castro's idea of bringing back the country. Why don't we do that? And, you know, he's hated. He's like, William Miller's like, he's a traitor to our people, and Miller tries to get him killed, but people won't have it. People are now starting to realize, whoa, Miller, this is not what we wanted. You said you were for us. What happened? He's become a dictator, and everybody knows it. Democrat Senator Walter Mondale, Independent Senator Frank Church, and America activist William Dyke to win re-election, but it's a minority government. Democrats and Libertarians have more people than Republicans do. It's shocking. In 1977, the Confederate forces enter the Prime Minister's office, killing multiple government officials, but Miller is not there. But in some underground bunker somewhere, it's called Earth's Darkest Day, the Prime Minister William Miller orders the dropping of an atomic bomb on Washington, D.C. It kills thousands. Fidel Castro, however, stays alive. And guess what? He sends and he's not dumb. He's like, I'm not going to send a bomb. I'm not going to play their game. But he sends multiple Confederate forces to burn multiple Union states to the ground. Like Washington, Jefferson, Utah, Nevada. He burns the states to the ground. He's not playing around. I just rhymed there. Confederate forces finally get to Prime Minister William Miller and they assassinate him, winning the war. They surrender. We're like, please, just don't hurt us. And Castro's like, okay, I won't. You guys are my people now. And he shows this by putting Ronald Reagan as his secretarial label, the first Northerner to be a part of the Confederate presidential administration. So Reagan and Castro, they work together. 1979, the Second American Reconstruction occurs. The North and the South merge up once again. President Castro renames the country to the Confederate States of the Union, or the CSU. And President Castro and guess what? The Iranian hostage crisis occurs, but President Castro, he does it a bit differently. He says, okay, you give us back our people, or we're going to war. In 1980, Iran hands over hostage to President Castro after the president has to make a second threat. This time, the use of nukes. He's like, "Look, I'll push this button. I'll do it." 1981, President Castro declares,
Forgive the people, forgive the North for past troubles. They are Americans too.
And so the 1981 Confederate election hangs up. Fidel Castro at the peak of his popularity. Democrat President Fidel Castro defeats Whig Senator Bob Dole 233 to 42 to win re-election. And yes, the Mexico states are still a part of this, as well as Cuba. I haven't forgotten, don't worry. 1982, President Castro signs the Western Virginia Statehood Act, so West Virginia is now its own state, as they've been asking for since the beginning of Castro's presidency. Excuse me. Reconstruction ends in 1983, so all 50 plus states are now part of one country. 1984, Secretary of Labor Ronald Reagan declares a war on drugs. There you go. 1985, Fidel Castro and Mikhail Gorbachev meet in the USSR, hoping to ease tensions, try to end the Cold War. It doesn't end. 1986, President Castro announces that Martin Luther King Day will be a federal holiday. Castro had much respect for Martin Luther King in this timeline, so he honors him with the day, a federal holiday. President Castro also outlaws genocide, so that's another popular thing he did. And so that is the end of this video. Remember, episode 7 will be the finale. We've done it. It's the finale. Let's drink. Anyway, guys, this is the Caddick one saying, peace.